This week on the Steele Report.
So I am pro-life with exceptions for rape, incest, and the life of the mother. That's been my long-held position. I've worked very hard to ensure that the best way to prevent abortion is to prevent pregnancy.
Now from KWWL, this is the Steele Report.
And welcome to this week's edition of the Steele Report. And today we're going to continue with our congressional candidate interviews. And our guest this week is going to be incumbent Republican in the 1st District. That's Dr. Mariannette Miller-Meeks. She is seeking a third term in Congress. She's a physician, an ophthalmologist, an Army veteran, and we interviewed her recently in Iowa City. And I asked her, what does she see as the top issue in her rematch with Democratic challenger Christina Bohannon?
The economy, I think, is the number one issue for everyone. People are struggling, and I know what that's like. I'm the 4th of 8 kids. Neither of my parents were college educated. My dad was enlisted Air Force, so we traveled around, but I mostly grew up in Texas. My mom had a GED and worked. And when I was 15 and burned in a kitchen fire, decided I was going to become a doctor. And it was tough. It's tough growing up in a family where, you know, your dad's working extra jobs, you're cleaning the pizza parlor with him on the weekend. But I left home to work, put myself through school, started at community college, enlisted when I was 18. I got a degree in nursing so I could work at night and put myself through medical school, and then came to Iowa and remained here with my husband and then our 9-month-old son. So I really know the struggle people face. I grew up with it. My husband did as the second of 9 kids growing up in North Carolina. And that for everyone is the top issue. You know, how government spending in the first couple of years of the Biden-Harris administration had led to inflation and high prices, whether it's high prices at the gas pump, high prices in the grocery store, and we know 60% of food cost is energy. And so when you tackle and reduce domestic energy production, that leads to higher prices as well as the government spending. So policies by this administration creating higher prices and also higher interest rates as a way to try to tackle inflation when it went up to 9%. And so now facing both high prices and high interest rates, and families are struggling, and young people don't feel that the American dream that I participated in, is available to them.
Are you still with President Trump all the way on his policies, or do you wish he'd stay away from certain issues when he's talking like sanctions against John Deere, basically in the form of tariffs? When you first heard him say that, what did you think? Well,
first and foremost, I grew up in Southeast Texas. And so low levels of illegal immigration were not unheard of. But what's happening at the southern border now is truly a crisis. And this evolved because the policies that were done by executive order through President Trump, all of those were revoked when the Biden-Harris administration came in. So you now have a crisis where you have, you know, almost 10 million people coming across our border. They are coming into the interior of the country, but even our border states are inundated with individuals, and there is a cost to those individuals coming into this country. We also have people on the terror watch list that are coming across, over 150 different nationalities, in addition to which we have untold amount of drugs coming across. The fentanyl, synthetic fentanyl that comes across, the components for that are sent from China to the cartels in Mexico. They develop the drugs, and then the drugs are sent into the United States. So it is a crisis of untold proportions. And I remember under President Obama that Jay Johnson said, 1,000 people coming across our border a day is a crisis. It's vastly more than that. And slowing down the flow by flying people or busing them from south of the border into the interior of the country is not handling that problem. So first and foremost, we got rid of executive orders that really did reduce the flow of illegal immigrants into our country, and did so in a humanitarian way, policies that were effective and that worked. I would say that where I may have a disagreement with some is that these policies should be done by Congress. Congress should do its job in passing these laws. So we need to pass immigration law. I have several immigration bills on legal immigration that whether it's the Afghan Adjustment Act or the American Children's Act that we've been trying to get across. And I do agree with building the fence because of the technology that comes with it. If you go to the border, and I've been there 4 times, If you go to the border and you talk to the Customs and Border Protection agents or to the Customs and Border Protection Union, they will tell you that the cartels have control over the border. They have drones that they send across. They will send messages to the agents that a large group of people are coming across. They'll have people come across in one area where the agents have to go to process them. Meanwhile, in another unprotected area where they're not doing their job and not the job they want to do, and not protecting the border because they're processing drugs and people that we don't want to know that are coming across, or the cartels don't want us to know are coming across. So it's a huge problem. We need to build the fence. We need to do the technology, whether they're sensors, whether they're viewing. That technology is very important to our Customs and Border Protection agents. And I'll also tell you that their morale is very low. The attrition rate, either for re-upping their assignment or coming in, is at 30%. So the morale is very low because they don't feel that they're doing the job that they are hired to do and protecting our nation. So it is both a national security issue as well as it is an inundation of people into our country at the cost of, and you've heard this from Democrat mayors, at the cost of millions of dollars.
I want to go back real quickly. The tariffs, so that the president is kind of threatening on John Deere. What did you think? Did you kind of cringe when he said that or not?
I think what's happening is a reflection of the economy and what the Biden-Harris administration has done to this economy. How have they, with their regulatory apparatus, their war on domestic energy production, the inflation and high interest rates, all of that affects John Deere and any company's ability to be successful in a very difficult climate. So you have policies that are counterproductive to being able to maintain a presence here in the United States. So I go back and say the economic policies of this administration and what a Harris-Walz administration is advocating for will lead to more hardship in the United States. We need to take a look at what, the pro-growth policies we had in the last administration that allowed low levels of inflation. If you recall, inflation was under 2% when President Trump left office, and 5 months into the Biden-Harris administration, it was 5.6% by May of 2021. You can fact check that. It was 5.2 or 5.6%. You had increased regulatory burden. You had increased centralized government control. You had a reduction in domestic energy production after canceling the Keystone Pipeline. Leases on public land have been abysmal and extremely few. And then most recently, the pause or prohibition of exports of LNG, which other countries want. Those are, and then the inflationary crisis. All of that has led to a position where companies are struggling, and companies are struggling because farmers are struggling, because individuals are struggling, because they can't afford, in a high interest rate environment and high price environment, they can't afford to be successful. So I would go back to those policies and say we need an administration that is going to put through a regulatory environment that is a pro-growth regulatory environment. It is a pro-growth economic plan that allows all of us to succeed.
Farmers are struggling right now, and then the Farm Bill just gets stuck. It's going nowhere. What is the answer to getting that Farm Bill, a new Farm Bill, approved in Congress?
Well, thank you for asking that. And I would say that's been one of the things that has been the most frustrating in Congress, is trying to get a Farm Bill passed. We know that Chair G.T. Thompson from Pennsylvania, who's actually a dairy farmer, had gone around, visiting with farmers, visiting with farm organizations, holding roundtables, visiting, numerous different states, visiting with all the stakeholders to craft a farm bill that really was centered on farmers. As we know, most of the Farm Bill is related to nutrition programs. Only about 16% are actually related to to agriculture. And not only the crop insurance, not only animal disease surveillance and detection, conservation programs, water quality, USDA, but also very important in the Farm Bill is trade. And this administration has done almost nothing on the trade front, and trade's very important to our farmers. They finally got the text of the bill drafted, and then it was the negotiations with the House Democrats and especially the Senate Democrats to get that bill across. Meanwhile, we're trying to get appropriation bills through. And so it's disappointing that we haven't gotten it through. We did put parts of the Farm Bill, very important parts, into the continuing resolution. So we have some there. We had extended it last year, but we're going to continue to try to get that Farm Bill done. We're pushing for that. We've sent letters in that regard. We're going to continue to try to get this Farm Bill done in the lame duck session.
You're used to close races. You won your first one 4 years ago by 6 votes. You had a pretty comfortable 20,000, almost 21,000 vote margin last time. This time, all these polls are showing this a very close race. So how do you convince voters that you deserve to be re-elected to a third term?
Yes, it's a swing district. We always anticipated that it would be a close race, especially in a presidential year. That makes the dynamics a little bit different. But I have worked very hard for this district. One, being accessible in the district. I meet with people in the district. I travel extensively when I'm here. Bills that we have put across in Congress have actually come from visiting with people in the district or visiting with Iowans when they come to Washington, D.C. When I'm in Washington, D.C., I meet with Iowans. We will do what we can, change our schedule to try to meet with Iowans who are coming into Washington, D.C. I'm not 100%, but I work very hard to be able to be accessible to individuals when they come. Despite whatever group they are, whether they're a group that tends to be friendly to Republicans or not, businesses, nonprofits, educational institutions, students, families who are visiting. I serve on the Energy and Commerce Committee. I have worked very hard and very diligently and have several bills that would help lower prescription drug prices now. I crossed the aisle to vote to cap insulin at $35. Not always easy to cross the aisle to do things like that, but I felt it was important given where prices are. We have worked on our community project funding in listening to elected leaders within communities, mayors, county supervisors, on what their community needs to thrive so that we can revitalize, especially rural Iowa. So we've worked both on healthcare accessibility, healthcare affordability. I'm on a bipartisan paid working leave group working on how we can support families. I have a bill for in vitro fertilization tax credits, over-the-counter oral contraception, a bill that would extend the child tax credit to women while they're pregnant to help struggling families know that if finances are a decision maker and whether or not they have a child, that we want to support them through that. So whether it's trying to lower prices, whether it's trying to secure the border, lower prescription drug prices, get access to affordable health care, I have been working on that front, as well as supporting our communities to make sure that they can grow, that we can revitalize rural Iowa, and that Iowa continues to be the best place to live, work, play, and raise a family.
So your opponent has made reproductive rights the center of her campaign, and it appears to be working. Where are you on abortion as far as you needed to come out and kind of defend yourself because you're getting hammered along that line?
Well, the majority of people have some restrictions on abortion, and the time would be where. So I am pro-life with exceptions for rape, incest, and the life of the mother. That's been my long-held position. I've worked very hard to ensure that the best way to prevent abortion is to prevent pregnancy. So in the state Senate in 2019, I passed a bill, led and passed a bill through the state Senate for oral contraception over the counter.
That bill didn't get out.
It passed the Senate. So it passed the Senate, I passed it, it passed the Senate, it passed with Republicans, 26 Republicans voting for that bill. Nonetheless, that is where I am on the issue, and it proves where I am on the issue, rather than the lie that my opponent espouses. So I've been, vocal on this. I have had debates on this in every primary. I'm a physician. I have been very supportive of women and mothers, both in state government. I have worked to get waiver of Medicaid for lawful permanent residents to have access to Medicaid. I have worked on over-the-counter oral contraception at the federal level. We have done a resolution on our support for in vitro fertilization, and I felt that wasn't enough. So we've introduced a bill that has tax credits for in vitro fertilization, as well as supported contraception at the federal level as well, introducing, again, a similar bill. And when the FDA approved OFIL as an over-the-counter oral contraception. I amended my bill to indicate the pathway that the FDA has laid out for having oral contraception over the counter.
So when you hear an ad that says, Congresswoman Dr. Mariannette Miller-Meeks is absolutely, totally against abortion at any level, what goes through your mind?
What goes through my mind is to say it's a lie, and they know it's a lie. They know it's a lie, but they, people see something on TV and they think that they'll believe it without looking up somebody's record. So as you mentioned, this was a tight race before, and despite having primaries, I have always offered my pro-life position with exceptions for rape, incest, and the life of the mother.
We'll continue our interview with Congresswoman Dr. Mariannette Miller-Meeks in just a moment. Welcome back to this week's edition of the Steele Report. Right now, let's continue our discussion with incumbent Republican 1st District Congresswoman Dr. Mariannette Miller-Meeks.
So I've supported Israel's right to exist and right to defend themselves. I'm willing to listen to individuals, and I've had people show up at my town halls and express differing opinions. But when you have a terrorist group like Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis, terrorist groups who are committed to the destruction of Israel and that Israel cannot be part of a state, I think Israel has the right to defend itself. A settlement and negotiation, but one that allows Israel to be successful. No one wants to have a regional conflict, but we also have to think back to why is this existing at this point in time. So you have an administration that decreased energy production, opened up our southern border, and tried to get us back into the Iran nuclear agreement, removed sanctions from Iran. When Russia invaded Ukraine, we were slow in our response, slow to put sanctions on, and allowed Iran to sell natural gas and to sell fuel to Germany, because Germany, and as we know, Europe in their green energy plans had stopped nuclear production and their own capacity to generate natural gas, so they were purchasing natural gas from Russia. All of those things, what happened in the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, trying to get back into the Iran nuclear agreement, removing sanctions from Iran, removing the terrorist designation from the Houthis, all of these policies of the Biden-Harris administration had led us to the point that we're in now. But you're correct. We have crises on multiple fronts. We have a crisis on our southern border, which is the second top issue for people in our voting district after the economy. We have a crisis happening and unfolding in the Middle East.
Where are you as far as changes in ACA, Obamacare, or how do you feel that is doing? What changes need to be made?
Well, there are changes in the ACA that were made during COVID to expand the healthcare exchanges to individuals making very high income. Those are things that should be rolled back. These are just gifts to the insurance companies and people that can afford to purchase their health insurance that make high income, over $250,000 a year. Those individuals should not be eligible for the exchanges, and they are. There are other changes that can be made in the ACA that would help small businesses and small businesses to be able to provide insurance to their employees. So those are changes that certainly can be made. There are other changes in the healthcare sphere that we should look at, because remember, when the Affordable Care Act was presented, it was said that it would bring down premiums by $2,500. It never did. Premiums went up. It was said that people could keep their doctors and keep their healthcare plans. They have not. We've emboldened insurance companies, and we need to be able to embolden people and allow people to have choices, people to define what plans work for them within the context of having support for pre-existing conditions. So, and one of the things that we can look at is what the ACA, how that has allowed the vertical integration of pharmacy benefit managers with insurance companies. I have several bills on pharmacy benefit managers tackling that vertical integration, which now controls 6 largest PBMs control 90% of the drug market, and prescription drug prices have only gone up. I have a bill that I'm continuing to get across the finish line that would save over $650 million to our government, but most importantly, it would bring down prices for consumers immediately on prescription drugs. This is something that we should tackle. That bill should have already been passed. I'm going to continue to work to get that bill passed because it is important for our seniors, it's important for individuals, it's important for our families and those in our vulnerable communities that we bring prescription drug prices down. As well as how do we make America healthier? And we can do that. And as a doc, I have a lot of plans and a lot of ideas on how we can make a healthier America, as well as have people have access to affordable health insurance when they get ill.
It's a very interesting year because it is a presidential year. 2 years ago, it was not. So what's the determining factor in your race?
Well, I think voter turnout is extremely important in every race, but especially this year, voter turnout is critically important. The Democrats became energized with the anointing of Kamala Harris, who never got a vote in a primary. So I think that has shifted the dynamic some, but not completely. I think when you look at, 4 years ago, are people better off today than they were 4 years ago? You now have 2 wars going on, one in Ukraine and one in Israel, that were not happening. You have inflation that is ticking upward, job losses increasing, whereas in 2020, we had inflation at one of the lowest rates, we had the highest wage growth, employment numbers, and yes, the pandemic changed that, but this was prior to the pandemic. So we had that success. We had a secure southern border. We didn't have hundreds of thousands of deaths from fentanyl in our 18 to 45, our young age group, because of the amount of drugs coming across our southern border, both that come across unknown and both that are interdicted at the ports of entry. So we had a more prosperous, more peaceful world 4 years ago, and people want safety, they want security, they want to know that the American dream is accessible to them. And I find that people are missing that hopefulness that they had 4 years ago. We have Hurricane Helene, and we have a response that has been a little tepid, it's been overwhelming. And I know that people are trying, but we need to try harder. President Biden is now making his first trip to the hurricane disaster area. You have Iran launching missiles into Israel. And we've had, an administration that has been trying to get back into the Iran nuclear agreement, knowing that there is a possibility for a bomb, relieving sanctions from Iran. So policies of this administration have led us to a world that is less safe, less secure, with less ability for the average person, like a 16-year-old girl who leaves home to become a doctor. We want the world that says anybody's child can have that opportunity. We want to feel safe. We want to feel secure. We want to know that our government is working for us, not working against us, not trying to suppress us, not trying to censor us, not trying to lock us down, but that America that values free speech, freedom of religion, our right to defend ourselves, that thinks of us as a prosperous, great nation and a role model for other countries, not to colonize them, not to invade them, but to be a role model, to be that shining city on a hill. That's what I aspire to do. That's what I think the Trump administration is aspiring to do. And I think it could not be more clear to me that this election is about which America do you want? Do you want an America where we are in chaos, where we are on fire, when we are on the brink of disaster? Or do you want an America where you can succeed in your definition of success, where you have hope and faith that your child can reach heights that you didn't even think were possible, and that you feel safe and secure both at home and abroad? And for those reasons, I would ask people very humbly for their vote. It's been an honor to serve them, and I hope that I have proven that I am capable of delivering on what I have promised, whether it's on prescription drug prices, access to health care, support for women, but support for a more prosperous economy and a reinvigoration of the American dream.
Well, thanks once again to Dr. Mariannette Miller-Meeks, the incumbent Republican in Iowa's 1st District, for taking the time to do the interview for the program. Now remember, next week we will have on the program her challenger, and that is Democrat Christina Bohannon. This is a rematch from just 2 years ago. We'll be wrapping things up for this week's edition of the Steele Report. in just a moment. Well, welcome back as we wrap up another edition of the Steele Report for this week. Thanks once again to Republican Congresswoman Dr. Mariannette Miller-Meeks for being our guest this week. And remember, next week it'll be her opponent, Democrat Christina Bohannon, will be our guest. As always, thanks for watching. See you next week.